felicitations from the NigerDelta Forum, Pandeff, which I represent as its national chairman. I bring you the greetings of our national leader, Chief Edwin Clark, who sent his best wishes to the convener and to all the participants. As you know, Pandeff is the umbrella organization for all other socio-cultural organizations in the NigerDelta region. And we have been quite active since 2016 on all the issues affecting the NigerDelta region. Prominent among which was the negotiation for the cessation of conflicts in terms of the production, the crisis that went on between the federal government and the people of the NigerDelta region, then tagged as militants, which brought oil production to as low as 800,000 barrels per day, as against the 2.4 million barrels that we were producing. And that led to the negotiation for the amnesty, which some of us were part of that negotiation. We thank God that that program came into fruition, even though the core mandate of the amnesty program has not been implemented fully. But suffice it to say that a lot of NigerDelta people have been trained in that program. The problem we have in the region is that we are just taken as the cash cow for the entire country. And people across Nigeria do not believe that the NigerDelta people can come together and find a footing for themselves. And therefore, they always try the divide and rule tactics in the NigerDelta region. And many of our people fall into this trap. But in Pandeff, we've been doing our best to bring people together so that we can forge a common goal for the NigerDelta region. And it is only when we come together as a people that people will take us serious and we can take back what is rightly our own, which is our resources. People are only interested in coming to NigerDelta region to tap the resources. They are not interested in the development of the NigerDelta region, nor interested in its people. That was why in 2000, 1999 to 2003, when I personally had the privilege of also joining the fight for the 13% derivation and resource control, I was at the forefront. In fact, I was the first person to shoot the first shot for the 13% derivation at the National Caucus of PDP in the year 2000. I brought it to the front burner through the National Caucus. I wrote the first 6 memos that were discussed in the National Caucus of the People's Democratic Party, which eventually gave a temporary approval. I call it temporary because after that approval, the president went to court. And I continued with Obawata to lead the struggle until eventually it was abrogated. I have a book that will be coming out soon on it, which will give full details of our involvement in the struggle. But I want to say that during that struggle, there was something that I found out and which is still existing till today in the NigerDelta region. Many of the leaders of the NigerDelta region did not support that struggle. And I'm happy in my book that Dr. Modular has expressed so. And that same thing is still happening till today. Look at NDDC Act that we succeeded in overriding the president's veto in 2000, which was to help the NigerDelta region. NDDC is not doing what it's supposed to do. Otherwise, if you look at the quantum of money that has gone into NDDC, this region would have had significant transformation. But surprisingly, most of the people that get into NDDC collaborate with our oppressors and rather siphon our money to the oppressors, which are not even from the NigerDelta region. This is very sad indeed. So I want to appeal to all NigerDelta people that we should come together and speak with one voice so that we can achieve growth and development in the NigerDelta region. Just like we in Pandeff support true federalism, and we are calling for it at every opportunity. That is the only thing that will sustain this country. Without true federalism, where each region controls its resources and only pay part to federal government and other federating units, the problem of Nigeria will continue to exist. So I want all of us here to support the call for true federalism. Self-determination, yes, but with true federalism, we can achieve even more, because there is more to gain in unity. But unity that is not equitable, unity that is not fair, unity that is not just, we have to fight against it. So I want to implore all of us, as many people as we talk to in the NigerDelta region, let us unite. Forget that you are an Ijaw person. Forget you are from Edo. Forget you are from Akwa Ibom, Anam, or Ibibio, or whatever. Let us unite. And once we unite, we will overcome them. The children of Israel are not too many, but they have conquered the world. So my plea to everybody is that we should be steadfast and unite so that we can conquer even the political class. Thank you, and God bless all of us.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think he deserves a louder round of applause. That's the national chairman of Pandeff, Senator Emmanuel Ibok, SCN FNSC. He said something very profound, that for the majority, for the government of Nigeria at least, the most interesting thing for them in the Niger Delta is the expropriation of our natural resource wealth. But I dare to say that in this conversation, if you read the manifesto, especially the foregrounding very well, the expropriation of the region is no longer just the theft of our natural resources. It's also the destruction of our traditional livelihood systems, the destruction of our swamps, which is the birthplace of our aquatic life, the destruction of our rivers, so much so that fishes can no longer live there. It's the destruction of our forests, denying indigenous populations of their livelihood. It's also the destruction of our farmlands, to the extent that the people do not only starve, but they are also poisoned. Life expectancy in Nigeria is 54 years old. In the Niger Delta region, it is 46 years old. A clear difference from the national average. We are not only deprived, we are also being poisoned. The problem is much deeper. Thank you so much, Senator Emmanuel Ibok, SCN, for giving that profound speech. We will be concluding with the interventions. And if you permit me, I wish to now call on one of our own to also give an intervention very quickly, because before we go into the other conversation for the day, and that is Dr. Akpanobong Emmanuel, who will speak very briefly as an intervention based on what Professor Gigi Dara presented in his keynote address. Dr. Akpanobong Emmanuel, please, a brief intervention. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, dear compatriots. I will start my intervention by acknowledging and agreeing that our ultimate target is to emancipate the people of the Niger Delta, need our freedom. Ultimately, we can have a republic of our own, yes, ultimately we can have a republic of our own, and maybe shortly before then, we can form a party, a political party indigenous to the NigerDelta region. But for now, there are some short-term issues that still bother us, which we must reflect on. The injustices we have been seeing extend to even tiny things that may not be easily visible to a lot of people. For instance, the private sector. During the last COVID pandemic, the federal government came up with a bailout fund, a kind of loan to health institutions. 100 billion was set aside at an interest rate of 5% in the first 1 year and 9% after the first 12 months. But I want to tell you the discrimination in this country made it such that if you take statistics of pharmaceutical companies, pharmacies, and hospitals in the NigerDelta region, not many benefited from that. Why? Because the regulators, the implementers are outside, and the same system of marginalizing our people got into a matter like that. I also want to say that akin to that, small and medium-scale companies should benefit from the Bank of Industry. Again, with low interest rates, a lot of our people, from what we have seen in the chambers of commerce around here, a lot of our people are not benefiting from that. So these tiny, tiny things are very, very important. In other words, as we are moving on, a suggestion that was made by the keynote speaker was that our younger people should be recruited into this war. And I also want to extend to say that our people, our governors, our National Assembly members, federal appointees, people holding offices like even bank managers here, because the kind of explanation they give to us in a situation as I stated earlier, shows that they are also handicapped. They are equally handicapped. They just, well, I've sent the recommendation to the head office, I've sent, and yet your people are suffering. There must be a system where people should be, or systems should be held accountable, that our people should not be cheated all the time. I also agree that the South-South, Southwest, Southeast, Middle Belt collaboration is a very powerful instrument that we must encourage, because by that way we have diluted the domination from up there in a lot of issues. Yes, things still happen that they detect from far up there, but if this solidarity, this collaboration continues, we can at least break part of that issue. And so I want to say that as we are moving in this meeting, we need to expand the advocacy to even include our local people. The chairman of Pandeff has expressly stated how disappointing the lack of cooperation, the lack of support to the effort on the resource control and other things was it. So in this case, if our people are not properly enlightened on the manifesto we are going to draw up here, we may end up not going too far. So I stop my intervention there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. We have two other very short interventions, and this is just to put Inuru Wills, Dr. Inuru Wills on cue. He will be foregrounding the conversation here today within the context of the socio-ecological dimensions of the discussion we're having here today. Inuru Wills will be touching on the key topical issues facing the region now. Yes, we have heard about oil and the expropriation of the people, but there are also other issues that are emerging as key threats that will inundate or incinerate the entire region if we do not act and act very fast. But before we get to Inuru Wills, permit me to also call on His Royal Highness, Comrade we're in the NigerDelta region, unfortunately. And it's been recorded that the gas that is fled in the region, if harnessed, and channeled into energy production can power the entire Niger Delta region. But we burn it off in gas flares, poisoning our own people. So permit me to call on His Majesty Dr. Comrade Chris Akane for his own very brief intervention. I hear he has a response to Professor Gigi Dara.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I'm starting on the existing protocol. One is, I agree with what Gigi Dara said. Prof, I want to give you an information. If you come with a question. You said we should clamor for a Niger Delta state. I want to inform you that there's a case before Justice Abadepo. I think that should be a federal high court. It originated from IPOB, that they want the federal government, the court to establish, make it easy for them through a referendum for a Republic of Biafra. And in their map, River State is included. A group of concerned Northerners also went to the same court, saying that since they want to secede, the court should pronounce so that they can go. I also know that INC has also joined because the learned judge said he will give time to ethnic nationalities that want to join up till October. INC has joined to say that they are not part of the Republic of Biafra. They want their own republic. About Ikwere ethnic nationality is studying the situation. I want to say the same thing. Now, my question is, should we follow and join the suit before Abadepo, or follow your own advice that we should clamor for a Niger Delta Republic? Second, from what we have seen here, the manifesto, there's nothing bad to have a manifesto, but I want to say that it should be comprehensive and benefit from thorough research. Thorough research in the sense that all other papers that have been written about Niger Delta, like Pandeff, many people have been talking about it, and the suggestions were made. You should incorporate all that so that you not only be comprehensive but deep. No, so that we cannot be saying a different thing. Pandeff will be saying a different thing. Other organizations will be saying a different thing. This one will now encapsulate all the suggestions made. In that case, people who are reading the manifesto will know that there's a continuity, there's a unity, and there's no gap. Finally, I also want to use this opportunity to say that let all the ethnic nationalities that are here or groups that are here have a follow-up. It will not be a group of people came to you and took a decision on our behalf, so that this thing can be going on. I'm saying this thing because we have internal collaborators with the Nigerian state. You also know that the Nigerian state has a ruling class, a bourgeois class. It is the duty, it is the raising data of that state, that the bourgeois class, to engage in what I call primitive accumulation of wealth. And the only way they can consolidate this is to have a fair grip of political power. They are scattered in all ethnic nationalities. And that is why when they are making an appointment, somebody like Gigi Dara cannot be appointed, somebody like Sarah Ewe, or even Dimo Bass, or they will not even dare look at currency. They will call it a troublemaker. They keep on recycling themselves. They can quarrel, yes, but when they will reconcile, you will not be there. Their tool of consolidating the economic and political power is ethnicity, is journalism. That is when they call us, oh, because I'm an Ikore man, that is why they don't want to make me minister. Because I'm an Ijo man or I'm a Bigo man. But when people were having this plan to get political power, you didn't consult us. So that is very, very important. We should know that continuity is very important. If we misjudge or misunderstand this aspect I have just mentioned, we're making warped suggestions and conclusions. Finally, before I go, to tell you that the ruling class in Nigeria is dominated by the bourgeois class of northern extraction. I want to tell you two things. 12 days after our independence, the premier of northern region, Ahmad Bello, made a statement that Nigeria is their estate, father's estate of their great-grandfather, estate of their great-grandfather with Madam Photo. They must continue to rule it. If possible, they subdue the minorities in the north and use the minorities in the south. It's what is happening. Professor Dana, you mentioned it. In 1948, the man who later became our prime minister said, hey, you Southerners that are in this National Assembly, you remember that there is no unity in Nigeria. All of you that are flooding yourself in the north, we call you strangers. And that is what they have been doing today. They are in control of the bourgeois class in this country, that's in Nigeria. So for us, it is very important to understand this very critically. Talk of remedial action in NigerDelta, they will not, because it's not in their interest. Talk of distributing political power and its munificence fairly, equitably, they will not. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, His Majesty, Dr. Chris Akani. And the final intervention we will have today will be from my own dear friend and brother, who, by the way, is a member of the organization of the NDAC 2022, and who has worked tirelessly to see that this meeting holds and is actually successful. Permit me to call for his intervention Mr. Ken Robinson, who is also the PRO of Pandeff. Mr. Ken Robinson.
It's difficult to speak when my masters have spoken. But I have a story to tell. My name is Ken Robinson, Pandeff, National Publicity Secretary. And incidentally, in March this year, I was also given the responsibility to coordinate the media for the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum. And Professor Dara, anytime I listen to him speak, I get some sort of fresh. Thank you, sir. And of course, the stories the National Chairman of Pandeff is going to tell in his book inspiring, and I'm sure that those who read it will be reinforced to take more positive actions. To the organizers of this conference, thank you for making me to be part of it, and I feel privileged to be part of what you're doing. I will tell a story, something that happened this morning, and perhaps it's instructive. I was coming for this meeting, this program this morning, and I was in the lift with His Majesty Chris Akani. And we're coming down from the second floor down, and then we got trapped in the lift. Yes, with His Majesty inside. And incidentally, two of us are from Rivers State. And I was wondering, if anything happens here, there's going to be a fresh war. But, we were there, we called the front office, asked them to send someone to get us out, and then they sent people and they were battling and struggling. For 10 minutes we were there. And then I told His Majesty, that there is something they need to do. They should knock down the power system in the hotel and restart it, and I'm sure that the lift will work. And so I called the front office and said, look, knock off the power system in the hotel and on it again and it will work. And it did. And we were out of the lifts in the jetty. So when we came out, Prof asked me, His Majesty asked me whether I've been in a situation like that before. And I said, no. I have a technical background. And I am trained to understand that if any of these electric bulbs go off, it is replaced and it goes off again, I shouldn't replace the bulb. I should trace the fault. Why is the bulb going off? And so I knew that there was a problem in the electrical system. And so if there's a sudden shutdown of power and a sudden restart, the lift will work. We have been talking, and we may continue to talk, but it is only action that brings success.
Yes.
So we need to begin to take programmed, planned, positive actions. And then I was earlier speaking to Reverend Dr. Professor, you can call him anything, he's qualified for all, Nimobasi. And I said, look, perhaps we need to assemble a team of people. Professor Dara has given us history, experience, and he has spoken about the past, the present, he has spoken into the future. So perhaps we need to assemble a number of persons who have the experience, the skill, and the understanding of the situation in the Niger Delta in context with the Nigerian situation. And then, what are the issues that have brought us success? What gave us 13% derivation? How did it come about? What gave us amnesty? What made us to have NDDC? What gave us the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs? Those are some of the success stories in the Niger Delta. And truth be told, there is nothing the Niger Delta has gotten that has not come from true struggle. And so I am suggesting to this noble gathering of great men and women that we need to assemble a team of people, fantastic manifesto, but it will remain a manifesto for the next 100 years. Pandeff submitted a 16-point agenda to the federal government of Nigeria on the 1st of November 2016. Federal government adopted it. The Vice President carried out fact-finding visits across the Niger Delta states to collaborate and see if what Pandeff has submitted was in line, in tandem with what the people of the Niger Delta were saying, and the findings were so. But this is 2022. 16-point agenda is still perhaps 16-point agenda, except Maritime University Ogoni cleanup. And so we need to begin to take deliberate, planned, programmed, positive actions. That's my suggestion to you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very practical, very practical. The need for us to take this away from the White Bridge Hall into the streets and communities of the Niger Delta region to action some of the recommendations we have here. But I'm sure that the suggestion which Ken Robinson has so eloquently presented will be taken very seriously by this Convergence. We should have a team willing and ready to take on the actions recommended. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we call on Iluru Wills, we have skipped one solidarity message. Don't forget our solidarity message was 1 minute. And it's somebody whom we invited here, profound son of the Niger Delta region, who is also the immediate past chairman of the Nigerian Environmental Society, Akwa Ibom State Chapter. The Nigerian Environmental Society, as the name implies, has a lot of foregrounding in environmental issues in the Niger Delta region. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor and pleasure to call to give a solidarity message for 1 minute, Professor James E. Asukwo. Professor James Asukwo, thank you so much, sir, for finding the time to be here.
Thank you very much, the chairman in absentia, the convener of this program, Dr. and Mrs. Nimobasi, my employer, the Pandeff chairman, happened to teach at the Redman University. At the college man is there. He gives me money every month. Members of the high table. Indeed, this is the first time a professor is given 1 minute to speak. I've not seen it in history. But I will make a very fair attempt to say what I want to say. My story is simple. Simple in the sense that I want to thank very much the convener. Sir, next time this kind of program comes up, please make sure you invite university students. I want the forum to be wider and good stakeholders. Because what I'm saying here is that when some of us pass on, who carry on the struggle for NigerDelta is not a struggle for 10, 15, 20. You can remember 1956 that all was founded. And we are still struggling. And just now we have been told we presented a 16-point agenda and about 2 has been implemented. So you see that the struggle continues. So the time is now for us to get people involved, the young people involved, so that we can move forward. Number one. Number two is that I personally feel, thank you very much, that what happens in the Niger, the convergence here is really appropriate. Even though His Excellency Abraham Victor did say that is a socio-ecological business. Sir, without political will, we can't move forward. God has so blessed us that we have this convergence now. And we know what, I'm happy one of the speakers said, we know what's in the country now. We want to change the system. I want to tell you, if you are not in power, you can't do anything. You can speak all the beautiful grammar from that spoken in the House of Laws in Britain to the US and all that. Without your person, a sincere person being in power, you will go nowhere. And I want to call upon all of us here. Go get your PVC, and not only getting your PVC, please be able to tell the truth. Enlighten the masses the way Nigeria should go. People who came to be around me, I can say this as a lecturer. But these people are coming up for presidential election. Sir, you come to me, I will tell you who I think should go. After doing a lot of research, the time is now. Thank you very much. Okay. Is this yours?
So much, Professor. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I need to thank you for your patience. Thank you so much. Somebody says I shouldn't patronize the audience. I'm not patronizing, I'm speaking facts. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the discussion has captured the most challenging issues in the NigerDelta region. Issues around political participation, benefit sharing, and all that. Important to foreground the conversation in the context of the emerging issues which is Convergence wishes to focus on. And this does not mean the other issues are less important. No, it does mean that, it means instead that we are focusing on these core issues. And these issues are threats, and they're also an emergency. These are issues if we do not address in a matter of weeks and months, and I'm specific, weeks and months, if we don't address them, we could have far bigger challenges facing the NigerDelta region. And to foreground this conversation in a brief presentation is our own dear brother, Dr. Nuru Wills, who has adequate experience in the private sector, has adequate experience in civil society, and also in the public sector. He was Commissioner for Environment, Bayelsa State. He comes with profound experience, profound thoroughness, profound wisdom, and he will be speaking to us on the current threats facing the NigerDelta region. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause as I welcome Nuru Wills.
Sorry, just 1 second, please. Professor Dara, our keynote speaker, who gave us such a soul-stirring presentation. That was a bomb. I was moved to tears almost as I was listening to you. That speech deserves a much larger physical audience for the right impact. Convener of this program, Chairman Pandeff, our Royal Majesties, and everyone else on the high table. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the original program, I would have had the opportunity to make this intervention much earlier, and then perhaps it would have been better for me, because one of the most difficult things to do in a program like this is to avoid repeating what others have said. And quite frankly, I cannot imagine what it is I want to say now that has not been said over and over already. And I was telling Ken a few minutes ago that's even before we came back from the tea break, that what has happened in this hall reminds me of what happens sometimes in church. When before the pastor comes for the sermon, there would have been some experiences such that when the pastor comes on, he says, we have already had church. So in fact, even my own job has already been done. Listening to Ken Robinson, my brother, I was wondering why I still had to come up. Because the crux of my contribution is what he hammered on, which is, what do we do now? The other thing about programs like this, and it's also been hinted here, is that I'm sure everyone in this hall has said to himself at some time or the other, enough talk. We've been attending conferences, convergences, conventions, and this is just another one. So this is the point where I take the word alternatives in the title of this program, NigerDelta Alternatives Convergence. What is it that we will do here that will make it different? Because talking about the current dispensation, for at least 20 years, we've been in this struggle. The struggle, of course, predated the 20 years, but I'm talking about within this current political dispensation of Nigeria. For 20, 22, 23 years, these same things have been happening. So, again, as has been pointed out, it's difficult in any gathering around the issues of the Niger Delta not to throw up all the issues that have already been talked about, which Professor Dara centered on. So we need to first remind ourselves that there is a spectrum of issues. When you talk about the Niger Delta, there is a spectrum of issues. And I think what Professor Dara dealt with had to do with the ultimate strategic aspirations of the Niger Delta people. We've been on them almost forever, from the beginning of life, predating Nigeria even. Because the kings, the old kings that have been mentioned here, King Nana, King Jaja, King Koko of Nembe, King Ayo of, was that the video of the Calabar area? These were kings before Nigeria came into being. And they were defending their sovereignty. The Western world talks about free trade today as the centerpiece of their economic models. 200 years ago, our ancestors were defending
free trade. So those are the ultimate strategic aspirations for the Niger Delta. True federalism, self-determination, resource control, and they are not just rhetorical, they are achievable. But while we are plodding on, even on those issues, as my brother Ken Henshaw has said, there is an emergency. In fact, there are emergencies. There are issues that we must deal with right now. So it's a question of sequencing. We can be pursuing the struggle simultaneously, the resource control through federalism, a proper constitution, because we've never had a constitution in Nigeria. Everything that has been imposed on us is a forgery. The constitution is an agreement between peoples. An agreement is never signed by one person. There's only one signature on the 1999 Constitution, Abdulsalami Abubakar's signature. So it's not a constitution, it's not an agreement. So those issues are there and we must deal with them. But while we're dealing with them, we have existential issues facing us within the socio-ecological context. Even those have been talked about repeatedly today. So I'll just try to breeze through them and then go on to some of my thoughts on what we need to do to start to create a change. Much of the talk has been about the environment, and the title I was assigned to speak on is highlighting contemporary challenges facing the Niger Delta, environment, livelihoods, and accountability. But I took the liberty to make a small extension, and that extension is the imperative of principled pragmatism at this time. What we must do right now in order to protect our region, to continue living, maintain and preserve our dignity as human beings, while we still press on for those ultimate objectives. So first, on the environment and climate change, natural ecological challenges that we face by the very nature of our geography. There are threats, there are challenges. And perhaps that's why God endowed us so bountifully with the resources, even with the geostrategic location that we're on, so that we will have the capacity to deal with those natural challenges. But unfortunately, not only are those challenges not being dealt with, and remember that before the advent of crude oil, hydrocarbon, we already had a Niger Delta struggle. From the time when our area was known as the Oil River Sectorate, and then to the time of Dapabirie and Borough Wheeling Commission, at the time, the challenge was that because of our location and because arising from the emergence of this phantom called Nigeria, power and the tools for economic competition had been pulled away from us and taken to farther locations. Therefore, we became like a people, a region that is disconnected from the rest of the geopolity that we were part of. So neglect, development neglect, was a core basis for the Niger Delta struggle before the advent of oil. But not only did we experience that neglect, with the advent of oil, oil has now visited so much more pressure on our people and on our lands. So from flood, erosion, land subsidence, sea level rise, in Brass, in Bayelsa State, Brass Island, there used to be a well, a water well, at the center of the community. Even I, when I was much younger, when I went for a particular holiday, I saw it. But if you go now, that well, where that well was, is deep into the sea. Erosion at the rate of maybe 1 meter every year or thereabouts is happening along that entire coastline, and nobody cares about it. But not just is that happening, the activities of the oil industry have now made it worse for us. So, not so far away from Brass, Kolwama, coastal part of Bayelsa State also. Sometime in 2012, if you remember, there was the KS Endeavor rig explosion that happened near offshore Bayelsa State. Now that was an explosion that happened at a project, a gigantic project, where not even an EIA was done for it before the project was done. And this is not heard about anywhere in the world. Nigeria's own version of the Deepwater Macondo 2010 explosion. Exactly the same thing. So imagine if the US government had found out that there had not been an EIA before they even started work there. In fact, the company would have just been shut down. But in Nigeria, I'm sure many of us are hearing it for the first time. But that explosion happened, and it's not just the pollution, it also wasn't the ecological situation of the people there. The Kolwama people are communities that have been relocated, they've been displaced some 30 or 40 years ago because of similar problems from oil and gas production. They were displaced and relocated, and this happened again. So that explosion was so impactful. I'm sure Alaoba Morris will have a better story to tell on that. It was so impactful that it displaced the natural coral barrier that is protecting the communities from the ocean. Now, you may not see the ultimate impact immediately, but fast forward 2 years later, in July or so, 2014, there was an ocean surge that swept off Kolwama community. And that's because the barrier that nature had created to protect the community had been displaced by that single incident. And the Nigerian government has not done anything to ensure that the people are, the ecology is remediated and the people are compensated. So that's just one. I'm sure it is the same story all across the NigerDelta. In Polobua Delta States, also known as Shekelewu, Chevron's activities and the activities of some other companies have altered the ecology there. You used to have fresh water, but now it's saline water, salt water going in. Because in most of our riverine communities, when the oil companies go, and you know, they came 40, 50, 60 years ago, when many of our people did not appreciate the technicalities of these things. And even if they did, if they protested, who would listen? So when they go, almost everywhere they go to, they will create an artificial channel or canal to the exact point where they want to drill. And by doing that, they are altering ecologies. That Polobua situation replicates itself all across the region. Talking about creating canals, the same Brass, for 48 to 50 years now, every single day, including today as we speak, AGIP is discharging produce water. That is the waste from their production. You know, oil production, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a technical person, but these things, you remember back in the days of NIGERIAN, we all became telecom technicians. We all knew what pair was because of the problems. So when you produce oil, you dewater it. You remove the water from it. But that water still has a lot of contamination, a lot of toxic elements. Now, and that is meant to be treated. But instead of treating it, what AGIP has done is that when they arrive there, they dug an artificial canal about 1.5 kilometers, and they discharge that every single day for almost 50 years, including today as we're speaking. And that has contaminated the entire ecology of Brass Kingdom. So those who live in Brass, and this is what meant to be one of the most prominent cities in the region. Those who live in Brass, if you dig a well for water, after some time, you will see iron content, contamination, and all of that. The list goes on and on. One of the other crises we have is the decommissioning crisis. Again, I think mention has been made about that. But it's important to underline this because our region is littered with landmines and time bombs. The decommissioning crisis, we're worried about the pollution that we see happening almost every day. The one we may not be seeing, it may not be visible to us, is that all across the region, when a company has operated for 10, 15, 20 years, and then the yield is not high anymore, they just move on. Anywhere else in the world, there are guidelines for proper decommissioning. And I like to break it down this way. You rent a house, you stay for a number of years. When you're living, you have a duty as tenant, as a responsible tenant, to put it back in a tenantable condition. It is that simple because it's important that we break down some of these things. They are not pies in the sky. So these companies have a duty to properly decommission their facilities, but they don't do that. And guess what? The government agencies that have a duty to compel them to do it are ensconced in bed with them. Most of the regulatory agencies are either in the pockets of the operators or they just don't have the competence to do their work. So you have that decommissioning crisis there, and it is one of the issues we must deal with concerning the Petroleum Industry Act. But let me move on to the question of livelihoods. I haven't talked briefly about the ecological threats. There is, of course, biodiversity displacement. Many of our forests, because of the activities going on, there's displacement of many species. I don't know how much work is being done in recording the details of all this, but there's huge biodiversity displacement going on. And I noted a few locations, even though this is true of everywhere in the region, but there are some that are like landmark wastelands. From Otuabage, which is very important to mention, Otuabage is the community in Oloibiri province where oil was discovered in commercial quantities for the first time in Nigeria in 1956, January 1956. But a few decades ago, Shell, having operated there over and over and sucked everything out, just left. So that's an example of the decommissioning crisis. They didn't clean up the place, and for maybe 20 years, plus or minus, production has not been taking place there. But in August last year, I personally led a team that went to Tabagé community. And 5 minutes drive away from the historic Oloibiri Well 1 is the Oloibiri Well 2. And all around the Oloibiri Well 2, if you go there, you would think that an oil spill just happened now. You are an Obia Royal, so you probably have an idea of the place. You would think an oil spill just happened there now because the reservoir is regenerating and oil is coming out again, seeping out again. I think it was Alagwa Morris, as part of the ERA team, Environmental Rights Action Team, that when this happened 2 or 3 years ago, went there and saw that without current production, there is a spill and the whole area is covered up in oil. There are nearby streams that are also polluted by that because the place was not properly decommissioned by Shell. So these are some of the landmark wastelands we have all across our region. But I'll quickly move on to livelihoods. But before then, just to mention that these developments have heightened the vulnerability of our communities and our region to the effects of climate change. Climate change is a big issue globally, we all know. But unfortunately, in our region, in our country, it is still not an issue. I say it's still not an issue because every year you will have Nigerian delegations going for COP25 and COP26. The question is, what is the agenda? What is the agreed agenda that we take to those conferences of parties? And what is the implementation? Nigeria has its own independently, its own national determined contributions to reduction of carbon emissions. But what has been done? Nothing up till now. A few months from now, there will be COP27 in Egypt. We will have a large Nigerian contingent there. They will just go for a party and come back. No change in our environment. The livelihood story is well known, and I will not go into any details there, because these activities have displaced traditional livelihoods of our people, fishing, farming, you name it. And I always like to give the example of Norway. Norway is a major oil-producing country like Nigeria. Norway has built perhaps one of the biggest, if not definitely the biggest, sovereign wealth fund from savings from its oil production, over $1 trillion. So that gives you an idea of how important the oil industry is to Norway. But even with that, Norway is protecting its environment. Norway is also known as a fishing power. Norway did not have to destroy its environment or its traditional livelihoods in order for other activities, other economic activities to thrive. So why is Nigeria so counterintuitive, so opposite? As a friend of mine would say, everything in Nigeria is opposite. So livelihoods displaced, which means there is forced migration of our people. That's why you have so many of our people. Any sensible country, any sensible economy should recognize the community as the central point of economic activity. Because God in his infinite wisdom distributed resources, raw materials across. God did not decide to locate resources in cities or in urban centers. So communities should be the centers of economic activity. But because of this displacement, our people are forced to come to the urban centers. And of course, you have all the other issues, the social implications, the conflict issues, divide and rule has been mentioned here, and so forth. Then the security crisis also that has led to. We don't have the time to start to do any detailed analysis of that. But it is a pity that these things so intertwined with each other have led to a situation where our people, our young ones, rural dwellers, are totally dispossessed, disempowered, and sometimes are forced to go. We're not giving excuses, but sometimes they are forced to go into what ordinarily they wouldn't have gone into. And so now, you have in the Niger Delta, along Nigeria's coast, some of the worst piracy going on in the world, such that I understand that to buy insurance premium, insurance policy in the Gulf of Guinea is just the name for, it's like the expanded or extended Niger Delta coastline. So insurance premium, insurance policy for maritime activity in this area is now even higher than for Somalia, which used to take the prize. Fast forward, we talk about divestments and the PIA era. So there have been several waves of divestments by oil companies, the international oil companies. Started from about 20 years ago, and then there was a second wave, and now we are in the third wave. Because, as has been said here too, they have left such a huge mess, they have extracted so much, maximized profits, not given back, left Oloibiri the way it is, Umuechem and Ogoniland the way it is, they are, and now, as we are waking up to start to demand for what is due to us, they feel they cannot deal with that, so they have to move. They're not just leaving Nigeria, they're moving offshore, where they feel that they will not have some of these issues, these protests from us. But the question, and this question has been asked over and over, is who deals with the mess that is being left behind? Unfortunately, Nigeria has to be the only country in the world that takes 10 to 15, close to 20 years to work on a reform, an industry reform legislation. That is the Petroleum Industry Bill before it became the Petroleum Industry Act. And in all that period, they did not deal with any of the crucial problems that our people have been complaining about. All they have done are pretensions, palliatives, appeasements. So we talk about 3%. And I hear you, Your Royal Majesty, Sarah Igbe, the 3%. Looks like a lot of money, but if you put it in context, what have we always been asking for? Ownership. Ownership. And please forgive me. I know that we've said the ultimate objectives of our region are issues to be discussed another day. But talking about ownership, ownership of what? Property. This oil is property. And part of the bedrock of any free enterprise economy is the ownership of property, property rights, private ownership of property. It's a fundamental human right. No constitution gives it to you. The constitution only certifies and guarantees that you do have it. God gave it to you as He created you. So we always had that right to own property. And from time immemorial, there were principles, legal principles, governing the transfer of ownership of property. So the question I ask is, which of those principles, which of those preconditions were certified before the ownership of our mineral resources were transferred from the Nembes and the Calabaris and the Opobos and the Ishekiri people to first the British Crown and then to its succeeding Nigerian states. So you see that regardless of Section 44, sub 3 of the Constitution, and this will take me to the next major issue, which is accountability and responsibility. Regardless of that obnoxious provision in the Constitution, the real problem, in my view, is that we as a people have really not taking responsibility of our own destiny. Because something is written in the Constitution does not mean that it is sacrosanct. There are higher laws. The American Constitution recognizes certain laws that existed even before the Constitution came. And so they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The right to ownership of property, the right to life, the right to dignity of the human person, they are inalienable. They are incapable, and these are my favorite words in that Constitution. Incapable of annihilation. These human rights, these fundamental rights, are incapable of annihilation. If you write 10 constitutions and say these people no longer have these rights, those constitutions are void. So, ownership of our resources, that's what we always ask for. But now the PIA comes to us and says, you have 3% of operational expenses. I will not go into all the hocus pocus around operational expenses and the meaning of that, because we will realize too late that creative accountants are going to re-engineer that expression, operational expenses, for us, and we will regret it. But we have the PIA, and we have a simultaneous divestment wave going on. And Nigeria has to be the only country where, after 20 years or more of the kind of protests and upheavals that we have seen, they think that they can even talk about divestment without first dealing with community concerns. OML 29, where that historic Olodri Well 1 is, has been sold by Shell to ITU. And I mentioned Otabage community, the host community of that first oil well in Olodri, the old Olodri province. For so many years, that community and the land-owning families, they were only hearing about the deal, the divestment deal between Shell and ITU, as if it was hearsay. For years, nobody got in touch with them. I mean, how else do you divest people of their dignity? Not even to say we are living. Again, I bring it down to the landlord-tenant situation. I like to simplify, because experts will come and make it seem as if these things. I've attended meetings where, when we ask for certain things on behalf of communities, people on the other side of the table, government people and industry people, will say, these ones are technical issues. And I ask myself, these characters saying this thing, are they from communities? All the experts came from communities. So if you, as a government person or an oil company expert today, assuming you came from the community that I'm representing, can't the community take advantage of that, your expertise? So again, to bring it down to that simple level of landlord and tenant. You've stayed in the landlord's house for 5 years. You want to bring another tenant. You want to assign your tenancy or sublet, as our people call it, and you just bring somebody in. The landlord is not aware. It doesn't happen, even in simple situations like that. And that is what is happening to all our communities. Some of them are in court because of this. So the real challenge before us, because that's just my way of touching on divestment, the challenges is throwing up, and then the Petroleum Industry Act, how even that act does not properly deal with these issues. To be fair, I know there are provisions in the Petroleum Industry Act that say that when a company is divesting, that is with effect from the commencement of the Petroleum Industry Act. Now, when a company is divesting, it must pass over its decommissioning liabilities to the new company. If it does not do so, then it will remain liable for the decommissioning. But if it does so, then it is no longer liable. As much as I don't want to delve into any technical, we don't even have the integrity, because we know the lay of the land. We know ourselves, we're all Nigerians. We know some of the people that are buying some of these assets. We know how some of those deals are going on under the table. Some of them cannot pass the muster of any process, any due process anywhere else in the world. So what if they don't even have the integrity to do it? The fact that Shell or Ajib or Total has signed to another company, and that company may be owned by some briefcase carrying, portfolio carrying business people, have agreed that they will take care of the decommissioning when it becomes necessary. So that then divests Shell according to the Petroleum Industry Act. And then when something happens, when these landmines start to blow, I call them landmines because it's not theoretical. We all know that a few months ago, from November 1st, 2020, last year, for 38 days, there was a blowout in Nimbe, the ITO blowout, Santa Barbara Well 1, for 38 days. That's part of what Shell sold to that company. Now, there are issues around legacy liabilities. What if the company does not have the capacity to deal with it? So these are all some of the issues. But let me quickly, because I know time is far gone, let me quickly deal with what I consider, and I promise you I'll try to wrap this up quickly. What I consider to be the most important in my own contribution, and that's the issue of accountability. And I took the liberty to extend it also to say responsibility and accountability. And I take the view, and this has been my view for at least the last 20 years, and I've shared it with practically everybody I know, especially within the civil society and environmental movement, that whatever is happening to us now, this is where probably there's some divergence between me and Professor Dara. Whatever is happening to our region now cannot be blamed on Fulani, on the Nigerian state, or on anyone else. We have ourselves to blame. And I've asked the question, with due respect, making allowance for justified exceptions like some of the royals on our table here today. I know of the Ogale and Bile cases going on in the UK, where the kings of those communities go to court in the UK to give testimony. Kudos to them and kudos to other royals like you. Oruma community, you're setting an example. But unfortunately, I have to quickly add this. Many of our communities, the leadership is just an Esau leadership, selling their birthright for a mess of porridge. And Esau is just a euphemism for Judas Iscariot, really. Because the level of sellouts, this to me is the biggest problem between the NigerDelta communities and our aspirations. The fact that in so many communities, you have traditional rulers, not all of them. Amongst us is King Burari Dakolo, a first-class traditional ruler who led civil society last year to the oil spill in Nimbe. But in many cases, our people, our community leaders, and then agents of the companies in our communities are too quick to sell the community for a mess of porridge. This has to stop. You cascade that up to state governments and our political leaderships. And this is the reason why, till date, we're singing the same song over and over. So, to conclude, I just want to make a few suggestions before the discussion breaks into panels. And those suggestions are that for us to move from where we are to what we want, there are three things which are all a subset of the concept of responsibility and accountability. There must be strategy, and it's a good thing we have a manifesto. There's room for addition. Strategy, there must be preparation, and there must be engagement. Engagement between us, civil society, and these are leaders, community leaders. We must ground this struggle, because if we want to be truthful to ourselves, a lot of these conversations have been happening without our people. We all come from communities. Many of the people in our communities don't even understand what we're talking about. It's English we're speaking. So we must ground it. We must engage with them. We must engage with our political leaders, with our governors. We must compel them. There are already, as faulty as the Constitution is, there are some provisions there which are not being used. There's the mechanism of the Council of States. All governors are part of that Council of States, constitutionally. What do our governors do when they go for Council of States meetings? What do our senators, our National Assembly members do? How is it that any annual budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria can be passed? How is it possible to pass an annual budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria without NigerDelta senators saying that without this east-west road being dealt with, this budget does not pass? How? So the problem is not Fulani, the problem is not even Nigerian state or framework and structure and system, as we always call them. Those are problems, yes, those are external problems. The problem, as William Shakespeare said, is that the fault does not lie in the stars, in our stars. It lies in us. We must take responsibility. Our governors are not taking responsibility. Our community leaders are not taking responsibility enough. We must engage. We must engage as civil society with these levers of power and representation to say, this is what we must do. So, for example, and there are always exceptions, I know, but I'm just making general statements. For example, talking about the divestment, we want to hear part of our work from here should be how we can put pressure on our governors, how we can engage with them and say, how we can engage with our governors to insist that without clear guarantees of the cleanup of the entire NigerDelta region, no divestment will take place. It's not as difficult as it seems. So our governors must do that. We all must take that as a responsibility. Step one, before we move on to other steps. Final point, connecting back to the keynote by Professor Dara. And I'm skipping a lot of other things that came to mind. But final point is talking about self-determination. How come, as a region, go beyond civil society, Pandeff, all fantastic work that is being done, Pandeff, ERA, and all our various representative organizations. But there's a lot of political capital that resides in certain people that we have sent out. Let our governors come together. Let us have a NigerDelta Constitutional Conference under the aegis of the governors. So it won't look as if we are hiding and doing something. We all, civil society, environmental movement, our political leaders, we all have a conference where we come out with an officially recognized document as a basis for negotiation with the Nigerian state. I will leave it here and hope that we will have more fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inuru Wills. Thank you. Thank you so much for that foregrounding. And because a lot of time has been spent and we should be ideally wrapping up in a matter of minutes, ideally we should be, I will just beg your indulgence to lend us a few more minutes to add to that. we are going to, you know, you left your phone. We're going to change the shape of the program. We're going to have a panel discussion, but we'll change the character of that discussion to be that our panelists speak briefly and then engage our audience. That's much better because we haven't heard from this side at all so far, and this will not be an appropriate and decent conversation if we haven't heard from you. So I will be honestly thanking members of the high table who have sat through the conversation today, thanking them very profoundly. A round of applause for them as we excuse them to this higher table here, and calling Mr. Tija Bolton Akpan. Tija Bolton, who will lead the last conversation. Mr. Tija Bolton, where is he? Mr. Tija Bolton will lead the last conversation. It will be a very brief conversation, but it will be an interaction. It's going to be a free-flowing interaction where you ask questions, you make comments, and so if you have those comments, please get ready to speak to them now. To be on the panel with Tija Bolton, we are going to be calling on our own very dear Professor Sophie Peterside. Professor Peterside, please. Sophie Peterside. Yes. May I also call on our sister Okon. Please, join us here, please. Also call on our sister Ibiba Don Pedro. Ibiba, please join us. And it's going to be we don't need all that. It's going to be a very, very brief conversation. Please get ready to engage in issues, please. So it's a 4-person conversation, but it's actually a 280-person conversation. All of us here will be part of that discussion, back and forth with this panel. I've been assured that this will be an exceptionally brief panel. And immediately after this panel is done, we will endorse the manifesto, have lunch, and close. We promise not to take your time beyond the necessary. And so, to lead this session, permit me to call on my friend, brother, and colleague, Mr. Tija Bolton Akpan. Mr. Tija, it is over to you.
Thank you, Ken. It appears my panel is incomplete.
You can sit on 2 seats.
So Professor Peterside takes 2 seats. Ken, who was the last person on the panel? All right, that's fine. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you, Ibiba. Good to see you again. Nice to have you on this panel. And Professor Peterside, can't stop distracting the prof. Welcome to the panel. Let's just dive in straight. We've heard so much today about the character of the NigerDelta people, the culture of our people, their culture of popular resistance, the very rich diversity of our ecosystem, and also the devastation that has been caused by the oil and gas complex in our region. And this morning during the keynote address, Professor Dara dived very deeply into the political complexities that have stood as a bulwark of resistance or some kind of hindrance between the general aspirations of our people and the sustainable future that we seek as a people. But today, later this afternoon, Inoro Wheels dove deeper into what I would call the more urgent needs of the times. He talked about issues related to climate change, issues around some of the emerging policy norms like the PIA, right, and so on. So, can we move this conversation into the here and now? How do we begin to respond beyond the talk shopping, moving into practical responses, what needs to be done immediately and how that needs to be done? And the way we're going to go about this is we'll talk for 2 or 3 minutes on the following issues. The first has to do with regional accountability. We have a lot of institutions in the region, beginning from the Willings Commission, like we've heard today, and very recently, and in the contemporary times, we've had the NDDC, the 13% derivation, the Ministry of NigerDelta, and so on. How are these institutions responding to the imperative of social and ecological justice for the people of the Niger Delta? Would like to start from my left with you, Ipiba. You have interviewed thousands of key stakeholders in this region. You've worked in communities across the region and beyond. What do you think is a challenge in terms of regional accountability? Is it a matter of insufficient resources getting into the port? Or is it a matter of the resources in the port being inadequately or improperly managed?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I just came in this morning from Port Harcourt. I could have actually stayed back, but it's my friends, my people, my family, Nimo Basi and all of us handling this. And I wanted to come in to have a say, especially in this month. Don't forget what it is. This is a month where, whether you like it or not, you're compelled to remember that the environment matters. The environment is our very life, and I just thought I should come in. We've had, when I came in, I listened to so many of the speakers, and it was like, are we having the same discussions we've had for 20 years, we've had for 25 years, because that's how long some of us here have known ourselves as Niger Delta people, activists, friends, people in the trenches, and so on. And I'm glad that it occurred to most people who spoke when I came in that we've had enough of the talk shops. Something has to give. And it's still about us going back to the trenches. Somebody did mention that everything we've got as Niger Delta people has come about as a result of struggle, of deaths. I just came back from a worry, and then the same Polo Bubo and so on, and people have been killed. So at the end of the day, we may speak to you tomorrow about what is wrong with federalism. There's a lot wrong. We don't have a constitution that genuinely, honestly binds us with other Nigerians and so on. But for whatever it's worth, we managed to struggle and got 13%. What have we done with it? If you imagine, let's say the billions that have come in through 13% were not pilfered, were not stolen and spent in hotel rooms, buying, the typical black jeep and all of that. A lot more would have been done in the Niger Delta. So for me, we have to go back, like Nero said, it's going to be back to us. We have to reignite those fires that kept us going, that kept Nigeria awake. We have to, that's not that way. I'm a journalist, I can't imagine what I'll be doing with my life if not working. I told the people of Polo, we had a press conference in Owori on Wednesday. I told them, if I die today, my ancestors are going to kick me back to come back and finish this fight. So it's about us. That's not that way. If the Niger Delta had a bit of integrity, had respect for the people, had people getting to political positions, electing, selecting, whatever you call it. If you have people who care, who actually spend the day and the night looking back in fear of their communities, there will be some sanity. So it boils down to us. Thank you.
So Ibiba says it boils down to us. And someone this morning also made that point about the challenge being with us. Made a comparison of what has come into the NDDC compared to what it took to build Dubai. And that got me thinking. If you look at the data, for instance, in the past 11 years, 6 trillion has gone to 8 states as 13% derivation. And how about when you compare that to what is being owed to the NDDC, 4 billion that is owed to the NDDC, and we are talking about inadequacy of resources. So I will come to you, MM. You have worked within communities in the NigerDelta, and you have seen also the inadequacy of policy responses to this challenge. The PIA is a case in point. We have said here today that, or some people have said here today, that the PIA is an attempt to legitimize the dispossession of the peoples of the Niger Delta. Do you agree with this assertion? And how do you connect what the PIA tries to do with some of the more pressing emergencies, such as the climate emergency, which is disproportionately affecting our region?
Thank you very much, Tija. At some point, I felt the convergence was disconnecting from the people. As the discussions were going on, I felt the convergence was going away and leaving the people behind. And the convergence, to me, from what I've seen from morning, has been so attractive. Apart from now that myself and Ibiba are here, even all the people I've listened to, I never hate women. Even the second keynote by Barrister Nero, he said a lot of good things. He actually brought us back to the people, to the community. But he did not link to the issues of women. We cannot achieve what we are talking about without the women. The women are actually the people that are supporting the men to do what they are doing, to achieve what they are achieving, to work in the companies, to hold political offices, to stabilize the home. If the women are not there giving that support, the men will not be successful. So we cannot hold this discussion and not recognize the role that the women are playing and the role that the women will play for us to achieve justice in the Niger Delta region. When we talk about the environmental costs of oil extraction, the women bear the brunt of it. Whatever happens to the men, the women bear double of that burden. So all the challenges that have been raised, the women suffer double, even triple of what we are talking about. Because one, the women suffer as part of the people in the Niger Delta, as part of the community members, but they also suffer as women. Most of what we have said, most of what has happened is discriminatory. So we need to plan and recognize the significant and critical roles that women have played, even in the Niger Delta struggle. Let us see, the former Mossad president would say, we cannot tell the story of the Ogoni people without the women, that the women played a key role in the Ogoni struggle. In every other community, the women have played key roles. And if we have to succeed, we have to plan and ensure that the concerns and the interests and the needs of women are part of what we are talking about. The discussions have been so very political without really looking at the needs of community members, the interests of community members. It's like at times we unconsciously think that community members cannot engage in some of the issues we are talking about. They can. I have community women here, Mrs. Windy, Ngozi, Peace. If you bring them up to talk about what they are suffering, they will tell their stories in their own way, very articulate in their own way. And they are the people that are suffering, giving their family members polluted water to drink. It is traumatic for a woman to know that she's using polluted water to cook food for the family. It is traumatic for a woman to give her children polluted water to drink. It is them that know that the water they take from the rivers, from the creeks, because there were no other alternatives, is polluted. They drink it every day, and they understand that they are drinking poison and giving family members poison. Sorry. You want to come back to me? So, what I'm saying is, we really need to understand the role of women. And I'll conclude. I don't know whether he will give me an opportunity to speak again. To say that for us to be successful, it is the women that will lead this struggle. I want to align with what the first keynote speaker said, that we need to plan what we can do. I lead a large constituency of women group, and we are planning to promote a women's economy. What we call by women's economy is an inclusive economy that will not leave anybody out of it. The women, the community members, the physically challenged, the underprivileged. If we have to promote development, we have to take the concerns and the interests of everyone into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and for those very brilliantly articulated points. I'll still come back to you on the matter of the NigerDelta women and their vulnerability to the impacts of oil and gas extraction in the region. But for now, let me go to Professor Sopri's side. Prof, you have been in this struggle for as long as I have been old enough to know myself. And I have read so much that you've written. You're a political economist, and you have interrogated this issue long enough. But people have said we have spoken too much grammar. Right now, some of the most salient realities facing us, what is called the imperative of principled pragmatism, is facing us now, right? What are the things we need to do to address the pressing issues of divestment? The oil companies from one end of the region, whether you're going to Tuabari, you're going to Polo Bupo, you're going to Ekbetiama, you're going to Ibuno, the issues are the same. The companies are divesting, and they're leaving behind a huge, terrible legacy of environmental and social degradation. How can we address this very in our face issue?
Thank you, both. I think I've spoken somewhere, what I call extensively, including Yenegua, on oil company divestment from the NigerDelta region. In fact, Nigeria is a captured state. Nigeria is a captured state. Our political elites are actually holding position in trust for the international capitalist system. When you say divestment, the preoccupation of every business organization is to make profits. So profit maximization is a driving engine of capitalism anywhere. Now, why are they divesting? The argument, part of that argument is that one, that the oil companies are no longer making
good profits. And for the Nigerian government, the activities of militants and oil theft in the NigerDelta region has crippled the activities of these multinational corporations. And so that's why they are going to areas where they think their business interests will be protected. That argument is very problematic. Now, if you are divesting market forces, rolling back the state, that's the core principles driving those kind of development processes. Let's roll back the state. Rolling back the state means that let businesses operate like business concerns. And business concerns are driven by profit maximization. And if you check the government's position, they say, wow, these oil companies can no longer operate. The region is no longer safe. Infrastructure are being actually disorganized. Another prong of the argument is, hey, globally, there is a drive for clean energy. And so, oil explorations are no longer very, very necessary. But the argument is this. At what point in time, the Nigerian government wake up from slumber to now know that oil extraction is no longer the issue? Where in some other parts of the world, oils are being even discovered. So my argument is, if they are divesting, no problem with that. The preoccupation of every business organization is to make profits. But what about the liabilities? Who are they going to hand over those liabilities? Communities have been disorganized. I am a founder member of the Joint Council. I come from both backgrounds, academics and political action. When we floated those organizations, most of us were not illiterates, former students, union leaders. We looked at the Nigerian state and based on researches and felt that this state, the only language the state understands is action. And so we needed to meet these states at that point of action. We did so. So I'm saying that if oil companies are divesting and handing over to indigenous companies, what about decades of environmental degradations? What about decades of denial of the people of the area resources and development processes associated with oil explorations? So if you are handing over, if you are divesting, then that means that responsibility is handed over again. But who are they investing to? Indigenous oil companies. And I will pose the question, given the nature of the oil industry and the funding of this oil industry, can these indigenous companies muster the capital required to continue with those processes? Will this indigenous company also take over years of neglect, disorganization, and disarticulation of the indigenous economy? Are they going to take that? So these are the issues. So you don't just run away after creating series of problems. And petroleum is the heart of the Nigerian economy. So if you are divesting, what about the responsibilities? Are you divesting the responsibility of disorganization of the means of livelihood of the people to whom? Is it the indigenous companies that created that? Okay, indigenous companies, given the nature of corruption in our own country, can they even take those small responsibilities the multinational oil corporations are actually taking? The divide and rule tactics of the oil companies, national oil companies, will also be taken over. It's going to be worse. For instance, let me conclude by saying, Convergence was celebrated at the last 19th event in Abuja. He was there. And while we were there, an international environmental award was conferred on him. And all of us who converged in Abuja felt that one of our own has been recognized, and it was important for us. Most of us were founders of the social movement in Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, for him to stand. What did he achieve? Share an international oil company in his own home country was prosecuted and found guilty and culpable. Our own indigenous oil companies who want to take over this, given the nature of corruption in our justice administrative system, Where do you take them? Is it possible in Nigerian courts? Where justice, in most cases, is for the highest bidder. Those are the key issues for this audience to evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for bringing that legal aspect and even the political imperative of holding the divestors, now it's no longer investors, but divestors, accountable for their legacy and ongoing damages to the environment and the socio-economic context of the NigerDelta. Let's do a little deep dive into the PIA, because the way the PIA was presented, it was presented to us as a solution. Someone said here, reminded us that it took 20 years plus for that law to come to be. And finally, when it came to be, it was too little, too late. Or do you feel that way? I will be coming back to I will come to the audience now, but I want the panelists to gather their thoughts on the following along the following lines. First, Ibiba, you have worked with a lot of the political actors in the region, and recently we had, the primaries, so many of them were ferreting resources to the center to buy second fiddle positions as vice president and all that. How does all that connect to the issues we are discussing here? And then Nigeria has something called nationally determined contributions, and you have been involved in the climate movement, for a long time. Do you think that the way the conversation is going around the NigerDelta, do you think that we can really make a dent on the climate emergency facing us, especially given the coastlines and vulnerability of the region? And finally, Prof, being a political economist, do you feel that the issue is about the restructuring of the country or addressing the management of resources currently? While you're thinking about that, we'll have 1 minute to talk about that and give your concluding thoughts. But I'll come to the audience now. You have been sitting and clapping and contributing silently. Now I want to hear your voices. We would like to hear what you think about this piece of legislation known as the Petroleum Industry Act. Do you think that it has been designed to solve the problems of the NigerDelta, or do you think that it is going to end up worsening our situation? Please just indicate by lift of hand, and the mic will come to you, and say your reasons, say your name, where you're coming from, and what you think. Just for 1 minute, please. I see a hand at the very rear in the yellow shirt. That's a woman. On this row, I can see Prof with a bowler hat. Yes, and on this row, yes, I can see somebody around the middle there. Yes, so we have one, the person at the middle there. Okay. Sorry, one in front, one at the back, in the middle. Let's start with the lady in the yellow shirt at the rear. Okay, she's here at the front. Please, let's begin with her. Two on this row, two on this row, two on this row. Can we start, please? 1 minute each.
Can I go on?
Yes, do you have the mic?
Yes, the mic is already
1 minute, please.
It's all right, thank you. Teacher, thanks for the question that you have asked. But I want to plead further that you give us the audience, at least to do some comments or probably provide some information around the entire conversation. When you limit us to the issue of the PIA, it may not do justice to the conversation that we have formed to have here. That's part of it. And so I'd like to just go straight without taking your time.
Please go on.
I'd like to provide information. We've actually talked a lot on the issues that has brought us here. I mean, to me, it's the first very well organized discussion around the issues of socio-ecological justice, and I think it's important that we continue to have this kind of conversation going forward. Having said that, I'd like to also bring to bear some level of information that we need to probably take into consideration while coming up with a more comprehensive manifesto probably as we move on. The first is the issue of the remediation process and the cleanup process that we'll be talking about around the Niger Delta. I'd like to notify us, and probably some of us know, that as it is today, the issue of cleanup has gone beyond contracting it to companies who do the due diligence to clean up the crude oil that flow to the rivers in the Niger Delta. Now, they are using some sort of chemicals to dissolve the crude oil into the river. And I think that this manifesto needs to begin to look at issues such as that, since we're talking about ecology. And so the importance is also about conducting, and I don't know if the manifesto has already taken care of that. It's also to talk about the issue of biodiversity audits. Most of our birds, animals, fishes are going into extinction. And I think that it's important that we also capture that in the manifesto. Beyond that, and I'm continuing, I'm traversing the creeks and coasts of the Niger Delta. I'm actually walking across 10 communities. I came from Cross River State yesterday for this meeting. And most of the communities that I've gone to are actually prone and very, very, should I say, in the near a decade or less, we won't have communities in the Niger Delta. We're talking about emerging issues. Let's look at the level of sea rise, the rise in sea level. It is really fearful because you see water coming up to the communities on daily basis. And so when we talk about issues of biodiversity, we're also likely to face human extinction within the Niger Delta if this is not taken into consideration.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much. Those points have been noted by the rapporteur. Thank you. You've got more than your 1 minute. Okay, so the lady in yellow, please. Can we give the mic to the lady in yellow? Please mention your name and...
Good day, everybody. My name is Precious Singh. I'm a School Sisters Coordinator on Kwai State. So I want to talk based on what that my young lady has just said. And let us observe gender equality. It's very necessary because I've been seeing from the first speaker to the end are all professors and they are male. I think we also have female professors. And also have females that are also doctors. And I want to say in EIA, environmental impact assessment, is very necessary in oil exploitation. That if they exploit it to the ozone layer, it depletes the ozone. And what is descending to human beings are cancer, that's why you see cancer everywhere. People are suffering from cancer of the lung, they have breast cancer, all those things, and also the South Gulf laws. I want to just send a signal today because there are leaders who will send them to represent us in Niger Delta. They should not take the opportunity for granted because we send them. They should check our environment. Some of those rivers are not even good again. You see, sometimes you want to fetch water, you see oil on top of the water, which is not good. Some of our mothers do go to wash their clothes. Even the clothes that they are washing them, in fact, wearing it, they can even contact sickness. So, based on this seminar today, I want to say I love everything about what our profs have just said and our guest speakers. They impact our life and we are going to learn, but let's work as teamwork.
Thank you very much. Please, can we give to the person in the middle row? The man, okay, that's Prof, yes, in the bowler hat. Here, up front, please. Prof, you've got 1 minute. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, the mic is coming to you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Des Wilson, a retired teacher. I don't want to speak specifically on the PIA because I think it has been a coup against the Niger Delta people. Those who still think that that document called the PIA is going to be useful to us, I think they are deluding themselves because there are so many elements in that bill, in that law, which has already started creating friction among some communities within the NigerDelta region. But let me speak specifically on this issue of us here. I don't know how many of us will leave this forum and then get out there and politician dangles money before us and tells us to sell out and we refuse. Because this is a great problem that I see in Nigerian politics. We all criticize the leadership, and yet we do not do anything to improve on the situation. And when we talk about restructuring, I don't believe in the restructuring the physical land. I believe in restructuring of the mind. We need to do something that the former governor in this part promoted some years back. He called it structural mental adjustment. And I want to look at that adjustment in some other light. That is, if you are going to politics, you are going to positions of leadership, you must subject yourself to to some kind of psychological examination. Because many of those persons who go there, the kinds of things they do and the kinds of things they say, don't give us any confidence that they are really sound out there. So I think before I go into more details,
thank you so very much, Prof. Okay, so we'll come back to this row now. We've taken 3. Let's get the gentleman at the rear. He's already standing. 1 minute, please. Please just keep to time. Introduce yourself and just go into your issues.
I think, my name is Decommissioning Simon. I think we tend to sleep after a little victory. This is on the issue of the PIA. When we look at section 263 of that law, of that act, it states that the host community development trust shall be incorporated within 12 months of the effect. That this law came into effect in August 2021, that's last year. But till this very moment, finding shows that the process of incorporating this trust is even yet to take place. And here we have 3 sections of this trust. That's the Board of Trustees, the Management Committee, and the Advisory Committee. So my recommendation would be that it's very imperative for state actors and the CSOs that they should push for relevant authorities to commence license for the implementation of this trust. Else, we will just fight for this act, yet we will not benefit from it on time. My second concern is that we tend to be so focused on oil, yet NigerDelta is very rich with solid minerals. When we look at, take for instance, Cross River State, a community there in Pharmacy, they are very rich with iron ore, limestone, but we see a company, they do not have the license to extract iron ore, but they are extracting it because they simply have license for limestone, and they do not even have they do not follow the relevant laws like community development agreement, no EIA, and they've degraded that community. So we should not just focus on oil, we should give little attention to solid minerals. Because if we don't, these colonialists, they are going to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So your point is taken on the need to begin to engage with the PI. It's been moved from 12 months to 18 months, but even then, 18 months would mean we have just about 7-8 months left. So how do we engage with this law, and how do we make sure that communities get what they can, or even overturn what is wrong with the law? Yes, the gentleman standing by the wall there.
Thank you very much, panelists. Good afternoon. My name is Ubongyang from Well of Science. I just want to make my contributions to the NigerDelta Alternative Convergence. I've been listening to various speakers and various panelists. So I just have a few points to make, which I believe will guide the organization on how we could drive this change. You know, one of the men that spoke said that who do we hand over this struggle to? And I turned to the lady that I sat beside me. I told her, must we struggle? So the question I'm going to ask is that must we struggle? Because it depends on the approach we want to take to get what belongs to us. So I just listed out 4 points. I said, number one, we need a manifesto that is very clear. And the manifesto has to have a risk and reward. Because if you're talking about achieving something and you don't have the risk, what's the risk of the fact that if we did here, the politician will not give us 200 million and we'll drop all these things into the gutter and walk away? That's the risk. Now, what's the reward? So all these things have to be captured in the manifesto so that people can understand what exactly do they want to struggle for. You may want to struggle for NigerDelta and your brother doesn't want to struggle. So who is the man that is going to struggle? That's the first question. So the manifesto needs to answer this talks in detail. Then number two, we need to have a long-term plan for the manifesto. You know, one of the challenges we have in the NigerDelta is that we start something and we don't sustain it. We don't sustain this. See, if you want to cause a change, it has to be long-term. So what's the plan from today to 2028? What's the plan? How do we intend to achieve this plan? That's a bit. But then lastly, the last thing I want to say is that you need to execute with a new form of weapon. We're in the 21st century. We need to change our deployment fight. We cannot be fighting tomorrow's battle. Sorry, we cannot be fighting tomorrow's battle. Sorry, we can't be fighting today's battle with tomorrow's weapon. We need to move into technology and see how we can use technology to solve most of these problems. How we can engage young people to drive the conversation. People should be talking about NigerDelta. How can they trend? How can we make NigerDelta trend on social media for the next 3 months? That's the engagement, and that's the future. Thank you very much.
Yes, very interesting point about how to draw young people into the conversation. Someone had said earlier that young people comprise over 60% of the population of the region, and they own the digital space. How can we put this conversation to that digital space? Interesting points there. Okay, so we have just one more hand there we're going to take, and then we come back to the panel. In the middle, the gentleman in the blue shirt. Can you stand, please, so that the mic will meet you? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Omo Iswaiko, coordinator of Peace Fund Development Foundation. I want to commend the organization that find it worthy to bring this to our private states. It is time for us to wake up. But my challenge is, when we leave this for what next? You have asked a critical question about the BIA. I think the BIA, to the best of my understanding, aim to destroy the community, is bringing more disunity among communities. So expect that there's nothing better that is coming. Committees were not consulted. Committees' inputs were not taken into consideration. So what do you expect from that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we still have one hand there. Please take it to Alagwa, and that will be the last hand from the audience before we come back to the panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Teacher. I want to go straight to what we call coal-fire or illegal refinery. When the Vice President told the NigerDelta, the wake of NigerDelta vengeance, in almost all the states, of which I also had the opportunity to speak briefly in Government House Bayelsa State, we talked about the need to allow Modular refinery, the local refiners, to be involved in the Modular refinery. And in paragraph 12 and 13 of his response, he did say these artisanal refiners will be incorporated into a modular refinery scheme that will be floated by the federal government, and that oil-producing communities will become hubs of petrochemical industry. Now, it is unfortunate that that has gone into voicemail. As we speak now, these camps are almost springing up everywhere. And it is giving us, who are monitoring the environment, big problem. Just yesterday, somebody who was kidnapped the previous night was discovered very close to his house, murdered. He was the CDC chairman. The paramount ruler who was kidnapped about a week or a few days before then was just discovered yesterday morning. He killed. His body was discovered in the swamps. And what is this related to? Somebody told me, whose father was arrested, that the father was arrested, accused that these people were killed because they were trying to stop local refinery operating within that zone. I have received several information regarding camps that are about springing up here, and there. So if we must act from this point, should we not take the Vice President's comment serious? Can't we face the federal government to say, you promised this, and the boys were cool, waiting for that to happen. But because of the voicemail, they are now coming out taking things for themselves. Sea piracy was not there when it was very much in the creeks. Then when you begin to stop them, we begin to experience this sea piracy, and we can no longer move freely in the creeks anymore. So please, we should take the issue of modular refinery or engaging our youth effectively to consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Alagwa. And let's come back to the panel at this point. Prof, I would like to begin with you on some of the points that have been raised have to do with whether we should be pragmatic and hold the part of the available norms, policy norms that have been put on the table, or we should take a more radical approach to addressing these issues. Let's look at that point he just made and connect that with the issues raised earlier, like the EIA, lack of community agreements and all that within the Petroleum Industry Act. Do you think that there is still room for the region to navigate around the PIA, given all these issues, especially from a conflict sensitivity lens?
Honestly, the issue raised by Comrade Maurice Alagwa, the first time you talked about resource control, how do we begin to restructuring? How do we need to change how do we drive that process? I'm a researcher, and I always quarrel with the issue when young people say they need a rise, to also begin to, that oil theft is part of the resource control. For instance, that fire is part of the resource control. I beg to differ. I meet them. I recall that just last week, the Nigerian Navy drew attention for an issue we already know. I've been at that site 3 weeks before that time and saw that that kind of work is going on. I'm saying that I disagree with our young people who think that stealing of this crude oil, but particularly the crude method adopted in quotes, the refining quotes. And when people are saying, no, modular refinery, my argument in my own kind of analysis is that we need to be properly thought through. I repeat, we need to think through it properly. Why are they doing so now in business? Because they do not buy the crude. Now, in a normal business circumstances and environment, you purchase the crude and you refine. So when people are saying, these people be encouraged, they are in this business not with refined methods. We are blaming the oil companies of degrading the environment. But it's also true that those who are actually involved in degrading the environment are giving our own young people. Because if you go to the site, I have relations who are involved in this kind of business. If you go to the site where this is happening, you'll begin to wonder. And oftentimes, they are victims. So when people begin to talk about the modular refinery, my argument is that, first, you think about the funding. 2, the technology. And 3, the environmental consequences of getting involved. So it's not just saying, give them licenses. Will they purchase the good? They are not stealing the good. Is it possible that they have this kind of business acumen to drive that kind of process. And so these are the issues that are being. But finally, let me also say, when they say restructuring, resource control, we have tried as academics to articulate these issues. And even amongst us, as people of the NigerDelta, there's even disagreement on the constitutive element of the restructuring processes. Because certain persons and certain communities and certain local government areas, where they think they're being dominated, and will actually want to leave that local government area. How do we address those matters? But as we speak, there's a research team that is actually looking at boundaries to see if really it's possible. Because when we say these things, as researchers, we need to talk about what's practicable. What is practicable? Is it possible, for instance, people are talking about the Petroleum Industry Act. We even have disagreement with how host communities are defined. Let me end by saying that in the Joint Youth Council, in the thick of our struggles, we refuse the concept of host community and adopted what we call whole community. For instance, if this is community A and oil facility is here, and community B, there's no oil facility. If there's a spillage on that creek, all communities on that creek are affected. Now, when you look at it, if only we define host community on the basis of the location of those facilities, without taking into consideration, particularly among the riverine areas, that if there's a spillage here, there's a damage to this facility that all other communities where these facilities are not located that are on that creeks will be affected. So that's why we felt that before we begin to ponder about these theories, we need to actually, as community people and as academics, help people to articulate. So that's why when we founded the Joint Youth Council, we didn't have problems. When we said we're looking at whole community, not host community. And so that's why we're able to hold meetings in communities and drive community processes. But I think finally restructuring is a serious problem. The Nigerian state will not voluntarily agree to restructure. All the presentations made here have shown that most of those who are wealthy today derive their revenue from petroleum-based businesses. And when we want to take over those kind of businesses, it's a problem. So that's why I think that some of those issues cannot be raised in the open. But I know there are people that are still working on theoretical issues and how things can actually come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And please, would you like to just throw a little light on the PIA based on the responses we got from the room, right? The PIA failed to make a connection between the current fixation on fossil fuels and the clean energy future that we aspire to. Do you think, what is possible within the ambit of the PIA on pushing us towards a cleaner climate future?
Thank you very much. The PIA as it is does not promise anything for the communities and for the NigerDelta. So it is a document that has disappointed the hopes and the expectations of the people. So I don't really see the PIA giving us what we expected. The community development scheme that is provided, the 3% that is provided, to me is creating a situation where there will be conflict and misunderstandings among the people in the community. And besides that, the PIA has given so much power to the corporations over the people and the community. So it doesn't even encourage somebody to look into the PIA to find out what are the positive things and things that could be beneficial to the community. I will move from there to the question that you asked earlier on the nationally determined contributions and it contributing to addressing the climate crisis in the communities. I am actually looking at what policies do we have at the state level and at the local level, the nationally determined contributions, how can it be translated to address issues in the communities? I think we need to localize what is happening at the national level. Let's look at climate change strategies and policies that we have at the state level, and how is that localized? Because if it is not localized, the people cannot even hold local authorities accountable, talk less of the state government. And we also know that the states or the authorities can access some level of finance to carry out the actions and they implement the policies that they have. But how much awareness or how much knowledge do our people have to access or to take advantage of these existing opportunities? We have been suffering flooding over the years, and there has been no lasting adopted to address the issue of floods. There are some communities now that will be getting ready to be displaced from their houses and their farms. And we have been suffering this on a yearly basis, but there is no hope in sight. And this is part of climate change manifestation. So what measure has been taken to address that? I have not seen any response that will address that. Then we look at the conditions of farmers, particularly the women farmers. What has been done to alleviate the challenges, the impact of the challenges they have faced over the years? To me, when we talk of climate change and addressing climate change, I want to see policies that can be translated into measures and responses that will address these little issues for community members. When we begin to speak about big things at the national and the regional level, without translating it to addressing problems at the local level, it means that policy is not having impact and governance is not having impact. So it's the same thing as looking at the PIA. If we have existing legislations and policies, and those legislations and policies cannot be used to address the problems of the locals, then what is the use of such legislations and policies? So the NDCs need to be translated. How can the local authorities, and from what I have noticed, I have created awareness among local governments, councillors. I have also engaged with some ministries. At the state level, some of them have ideas of what is going on at the national, but it's like we cannot do anything beyond knowing that this should be done and this policy is there. Mitigation and adaptation strategies. Do we have action plans? How far have we gone in implementation? These are the things I expect to see. And these are the things the constituency I work with, the women at the community level, particularly the farmers, these are the things they want to see for them to have that confidence that government is taking action to address their problems. When we talk about climate change, we need to link it. Thank you. We need to link it to what is happening at the local community. Let's also look at the COP. Last year, the COP26 was my first COP. Yes, I was overwhelmed with everything I saw about the COP, but I keep thinking in my mind, how is all this addressing issues, solving problems for us in the communities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pungent points there. We need to leave the big grammar and begin to address those simple, practical issues, especially at the local level, that can help us see change happen. 1 minute to you, Ibiba. From the responses you've heard from the hall, from your fellow panelists, what do you think are 2 or 3 of the most pressing responses that we can adopt going forward to address this issue?
Okay, I'm going to link this to some of the observations I made in the last few weeks, where this is a pre-election year, and I just came back from Yenagua and Delta and so on. I observed that whenever elections begin, everything shuts down, governance shuts down. But if we had that social contract between people, anybody, even at the local level, as a councillor, anybody aspiring to be local government chairman, anybody aspiring to be in the House of Reps or governor or senator, if you had a social contract, if you have a sense of obligation to the people of your constituency, there is no reason on earth why governance should shut down, just because you have to win or lose an election. I was in Yenagua 2 days ago. I got back to Port Harcourt, and I was at the secretariat. I tried to see some of the commissioners. I was not able to see a single one of them, and it's been that way for weeks. Why do we have that? That's because there's a deep gulf between what we do, our aspiration as community people, as activists, as members of communities, and the political system. There's no obligation to anybody. That's why, if I have to address your first question, why should the governor of my state carry billions of River State funds to a PDP primary convention and all of that, and spend and waste the resources of River State? I'm a Rivers daughter. I have as much right to those resources as Nyesom Wike, governor of my state today. Don't forget that this has happened severally, and now Delta State will have to pay the price for an Okowa being named, nominated vice president. Why do we keep having those things? This is the reason why when I first spoke, I said, we need to come back home. We need to come back to activism in the Niger Delta. She spoke about COPE and all of that. How many councillors in your state, in my state, has an idea of what climate action is, what we need to do, our responsibilities? We are in the flood season. I met Tife is here. Tife and my group, we went to Sangana. The community has moved severally, like 3 times in the last 10 years. The last time I was there was when I was a reporter with The Guardian. They were somewhere, and now they've moved in and they've lost some of their burial grounds. Somebody pointed out he's deep in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, where his parents' graves are. That's our activities. We need to bring the activism back home. Maurice spoke about somebody who was a whole traditional ruler was killed because a group of people wanted to host a fire pot, and he probably said no. You all are witnesses, those of you who be following. A commissioner in Bayelsa was brutalized because he said, no fire, I can't be here and I'm knowledgeable. No fire pot will hold in my community. He was kidnapped and brutalized. If not for the hard stance the governor of Bayelsa took, he probably would have been killed. So these are some of the realities. Iniru and I were just speaking about the privatization of the Niger Delta communities. These are the realities we have to face. If we are able to make some progress, getting accountability from our political office holders, you and I will not be here talking about API because it will not happen. It wouldn't have been, enacted. It was enacted. It was just a convenient document for the government to help the oil companies get away from their responsibilities. 2 months ago, I was in Abuja speaking with some officials in the regulatory agency, in a regulatory commission. And they told me, because they know my passion, they know my work, oh, Ibiba, we just want to help your people. And I was like, excuse me, you want to help my people? I didn't say much because basically, I've come to that point where you use any opportunity to advance the cause of the Niger Delta, and that's what I do. I hope to see what we can make out of all of those things. But I can assure you The PIA already, you know, it's under suspension because the federal government didn't want to, you know, deal with all of the currents that will come out of the, you know, yes, you know, activating that document. So that they pushed it to next year, maybe after the elections and so on. So, but there's going to be a lot of disruption because already it has abrogated whatever GMOU arrangements communities have with the oil companies. That's why you see that if you look at across communities, and I've been in discussions with several communities, there are standing GMOU agreements that are just lying fallow. Nobody's talking about them because they know that when the PIA comes into effect, a lot of community power will be so diminished. First of all, any oil company can come in and you're not going to have that kind of tenant landlord relationship with the oil companies anymore under the PIA. I've studied it and I've done reports on it. That's the truth. So those are some of the realities we have to face. But for me, in terms of what we need to do, we need to stop pointing the reality of the overbearing weight of the federal government on us is there and the rest of Nigeria against the NigerDelta. But let's come back home and sanitize the NigerDelta, the political space, the relationship between those in government and us. And then we'll be able to gain traction on some of the issues we've raised in the past 20 to 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibiba. The point you just made about the responsibility of our political leaders in the Niger Delta connects very straight with the comments I have here from Zoom. Someone who is following here on Zoom, Angalapu Dengiefa, says, I really think no matter the legal framework that is put in place, the most important thing is an advocacy for good governance within the Niger Delta. Definitely not enough, but if we have governors that think of the interests of the Niger Delta, we will be better for it. I think that this actually reinforces your point and brings us to one of the things that we've heard so eloquently in the room today, that as we push our advocacy to the Nigerian states, to the oil companies, and to other stakeholders, we should also look inwards and begin to interrogate our own political elites. Thank you very much, very distinguished panelists. We've had a swell time with you, and thank you, very engaged audience, for your contributions. Thank you.
I think that panel deserves a round of applause for being very informative and also very timely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for those who traveled from other states and came here, we dropped copies of the draft NigerDelta Manifesto for socio-ecological justice. Each person had a copy of that document, and also we made sure that everybody here gets a copy. We spent some decent hours here. I know that we all have time to take a look at that document. Not a long document, just 17 pages or thereabouts. But before I go into the nitty-gritty of presenting and adopting this manifesto, permit me to do some recognitions that I failed to do. Some recognitions which I failed to do. And it's unforgivable if I do not recognize some people here. I want to say that we have our brothers also who came all the way from Ondo State. All musicians from Ondo State to participate in this convergence. Several hours of traveling on road just to be part of this discussion. I think we deserve our round of applause. The same profound thanks also go to our brothers who came from Abia State and those also from Imo State to join this discussion. They also deserve a decent round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's also important for me. It is better done now, though late. But I need to recognize very specially the presence of my friend, my brother, my comrade, a veteran of the struggle for environmental justice in the NigerDelta region, a man who recently made this region proud by winning the Goldman Award for the environment. I failed to recognize it earlier, and that's unforgivable. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I recognize the presence of Barrister Chima Williams in our midst. Chima Williams, thank you so much for joining us. I want to also quickly recognize the presence of a few other people with profound work in the region. I wish to recognize Chief Africa's Lawal, who is the Asuku one of the Bridge, Chief Africa's Lawal. And also recognize Comrade Maurice Alagwa, a profound environmentalist, seriously documenting the issues in the NigerDelta region. Maurice Alagwa, thank you so much for being here with us. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's impossible to go through the several pages, the 17 pages of our demands as part of the NigerDelta Convergence. But I'm sure you have read it, and so I'll summarize it before we take our closing remarks. We have heard from the audience here today that our region has suffered profound abuse. If you doubt the abuse that the NigerDelta region has suffered, all you need to do is take a look at the UNEP report on Ogoni land. That report says, amongst others, that our region is one of the most polluted spaces on earth. It says that the water and the lands of the people have been so polluted by chemical hydrocarbons that is fast poisoning our people. I had stated earlier that while life expectancy in Nigeria is 54 years old, in the NigerDelta it is 46. The UNEP report says that a chemical component called benzene that causes cancer is in the water people in Ogoniland drink 900 times above safe levels. Our people are on the front line of cancer cases. Our region is not different from the assessment that happened in Ogoniland. Every part of the NigerDelta where oil has been extracted from mindlessly for the past 64 years is equally polluted. Ladies and gentlemen, we have also spoken about the fact that our livelihoods have become lost on account of hydrocarbon pollution. Our people were predominantly farmers and fisher folks who traded extensively among themselves and internationally. But those livelihood alternatives have all been lost on account of hydrocarbon pollution. Our swamps are gone, our creeks are gone, our rivers are polluted, our farmlands are dead. Our people are poorer for hydrocarbon pollution. If you look around the NigerDelta region and you think, is this a region where billions of petrol dollars have been extracted from for 64 years? The response would be an unanimous no. Definitely not. The NigerDelta does not stand tall, does not stand better than any other less endowed region in the NigerDelta in the country. Permit me to also very quickly say that our dreams of a Petroleum Industry Act that speaks to the wishes and aspirations of our people has been a disaster. We have a PIA which, rather than speak to address the core problems of our region, has instead exacerbated those problems. We have a PIA that criminalizes our host communities, where it says in any community where there's any oil sabotage, any destruction of pipeline that occurs in that place, the meager 3% of operational costs which should go to those communities will be lost. You will get nothing if you protest and go to an oil company gate. The oil company can simply say that your protest cost them production. Therefore, you get nothing from that 3% of operational cost. That's the PIA. That clause of the PIA simply states that NigerDelta communities are responsible for destruction of oil pipelines and stealing of crude oil, which is blatant lie. Oil theft has continued in this region since the 1950s. Former President Goodluck Jonathan said that Nigeria loses up to 300,000, 400,000 barrels of crude oil every single day. Chatham House said that Nigeria's oil is stolen at an industrial scale, that the money is laundered through international tax havens, and controlled by an international cartel. I want to ask, is it the poor oppressed communities of the NigerDelta region that with jerry cans that are stealing 400,000 barrels of crude oil? Ladies and gentlemen, it is not. The oil thefts which communities have been blamed for is only a very minute recent occurrence which is used by the Nigerian government and the oil companies to excuse the decades-long oil theft that has continued in the Niger Delta region and continues up till today. It's merely an excuse. And so we see a PIA that insults us by calling us criminals. We also see a PIA that does not criminalize gas flaring. Instead, fines for gas flaring will be invested into something called the Gas Infrastructure Development Fund, not to address the health challenges and the ecological disaster which the region currently faces. It is our thinking that the PIA does not speak to the needs of the people of the region. It's also our thinking that the emerging impacts of climate change also spells doom and creates a need for immediate action for our region. In a Bono community, a few kilometers away from here, sea level encroachment has happened up to 20 meters, to the extent that the popular Ibono beach is almost getting completely under the ocean at the moment. These are the effects of climate change. Since 2012, coastal communities in the Orashi region and elsewhere in Delta, Bayelsa, and River States have been inundated in annual floods. Every single year around this time, sea water encroaches in those communities, sometimes up to 6 feet. Communities have to vacate their homes and stay upland for at least 3 months. Our people now routinely become migrants from their own home every year, for 2 months, 3 months, every single year. Ironically, the communities that face these challenges are the exact same communities that produce the crude oil that is destroying the planet and is feeding this country. And currently, there are no plans to fix and remediate this disaster. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we also know that the people principally responsible for causing this ecological damage are packing up and leaving. Shell, ExxonMobil, and Total, the biggest polluters of our region and the ones who have stolen petrol dollars from our lands and our creeks, are packing up and leaving. Shell says it is making a clean break from its Niger Delta assets. How do you make a clean break when you have mindlessly extracted, destroyed the environment, taking people's livelihoods for 64 years? Who will hold them to account? As it is today, the Nigerian government does not have any single policy, any framework, any guideline, or any blueprint on how divestment should happen. Who will be responsible for the ecological damage in our communities? Who will fix the livelihoods? Who will restore the swamps? Who will remediate the Niger Delta region? And so, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we call the divestment move of oil companies not divestment at all, but criminal flight. Because these companies are running away from the ecological damage. They are running away from the ecological damage which they have caused. These are the key issues which this manifesto throws up. Just in case you have not read it yet, these are the issues it throws up. And we have got a total of 8-point demands. And I'm sure every single person has read those demands. They are not all the demands of the Niger Delta region, but they are the socio-ecological demands of the region. These are actions that need immediate addressing. Otherwise, we may find ourselves with a much bigger problem on our hands. And so we have created a register. That register has gone round for people who agree with the content of this manifesto to sign on to. This is a manifesto which we, people of the Niger Delta region, have given unto ourselves for socio-ecological liberation. This is the Niger Delta Manifesto for Social and Ecological Justice. And if you agree with the content of this manifesto, I welcome you, beginning with those our fathers who occupy the high table. So please approach the table here and endorse their signature and tell the people of the region that we stand with you, we stand with this manifesto, and we shall fight together to realize the content of this manifesto for social and ecological justice in the NigerDelta region. I can tell you for a fact that this is not a one-off intervention. This is only the start of the conversation. We shall put strategies in place, we shall put plans in place with each and every one of you to ensure that each day, each week, each month, and each year, we take inches forward towards realizing the content of this manifesto that we give unto ourselves. And so I will invite members of our high table who are now on the other side to please approach. And if you agree with the content of the manifesto, we will very happily have you endorse the manifesto. Professor Lucky Akarose steps forward first. Thank you very much, Professor. I see Professor G.G. Dara and His Royal Majesty Sarah is up. The region is together on this. I think he deserves a round of applause. Another register, please. Thank you so much, Professor Dara. Thank you so much. His Royal Majesty Sarah. The other register, please.
we'll go to somewhere else. We're not deciding where it's going to be, so you will also help us decide where to go. We may decide to do it in the ocean, either Lakasa or Ebola or wherever. So all decide on that. So let me thank very much all the youths who make time to come. There are a lot of young people in this room, university students, who have come to the school of life while their universities are shut down. This is a place, it was an excellent place to learn. We get a lot of our education from the streets. So let's continue to learn, whether the universities are closed or not. But we do hope that universities get reopened. I talk about the foreign universities because the great disservice to have our young people stay at home for so many months without any sense of organized learning. But of course, young people, you can go online, sign up for courses and get yourself busy and engaged and not be idle at all. Now, so I thank the young people for coming. We thank the women. The women. Women, are you here? If I know you. All right. So thank you so much. We fully recognize the role of our women and we apologize for that impression that was created. It wasn't intentional. Next time it will be all female panel. And then the men will complain. That is democracy. Let me thank Professor GTBANK for giving us that very provocative presentation. Very interesting. It was all our Royal Highnesses, all the interventionists, and thanks to Obo Victor, who was here very early and spent a great deal of time, much more than what a lot of people do when they come to meetings of this nature. And this is why I especially applaud our Royal Highnesses for being here from morning till the close of the day. This is very uncommon, very uncommon. And I'll tell you all, in some meetings by this time, people will be strolling everywhere, but you are all seated, and I'm tempted to say that we can continue till midnight. But when we finish, we're going for, somebody will give us some housekeeping announcements. So let me just close by using the Achebe principle. Chino Achebe said, there's a formula for thanking people, and when you use that formula, you never go wrong. And that is by saying, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we are done. Is lunch ready? Yes, so lunch is served. Any announcement on how we do lunch or my initiative? Okay, so I think we have got one here. Another at the back. Our royal fathers and professors are members of high table. Please relax, we will sort out a way to serve you in a smoother way so you do not have to go to the back and queue. And just to tell you that those delegates who came from outside town and in the hotels, please, there will be, for those who are at Havila Hotel, there will be a vehicle to convey you back to the hotel when lunch is over. Our logistics people will see you there at the hotel. For those who are in Marcus Hotel, such a rooms are still paid for. And for other people, other delegates and participants, we have created a very modest course to support your transportation back. That's after lunch. But please, if you have not yet signed the register and endorsed the manifesto, it's important to do. If you go to the NDAC website, which is www.ndac.africa, you will see a link which you can share with your friends and colleagues to also sign on to the manifesto. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades, thank you very, very much.
Yes.